After two days, which were, I think, a great experience with a lot of very different sessions, and somebody said it felt a bit like being in stratosphere sometimes, and sometimes it was very much on the ground. So I think we had discussions, conversations, presentations, some art as well, and I also found very impressive this moments of complete silence that we had in the session with the photographs, and that was very interesting. So now, just rounding up, I would like to indeed come back to this question of concretely, practically, how do we go on from here? Because that's I think a difficult question. Some touched on some elements here, what we could do, but it remains a very broad topic. So let me see, what did I write up here? First, maybe coming back to this issue of crisis or not. I found it interesting this morning when Dan Sarovic asked the question here, who thought there was a crisis and who not, and that was something that's really split the room in two. I think that would be the same if you take a bottle and ask, is it half full or half empty? I think it's just, as you said, it's a question of what are your expectations, what is your reference level, what do you start from? And maybe it would also be interesting to see what part of the room were the ones that answered it's a crisis, and which were the ones that said it's not a crisis. I think maybe the ones that were more or closer to policy maybe thought it was not a crisis, because there are many parts in policy where science has played not so much a role. I think there's an impression here that science has got a very big influence in policy, and that may be true in some aspects of policy, but in many elements, when I go to Brussels, I see that in most places policy is just made on the basis of first journalism, what is in the newspaper, and there some policy follows on that, but also in the policy process, the scientists are not very involved, and if therefore involved, they're very late. So I think one of the remarks that was made here on how to follow up on this, it's pushing for early involvement. Early involvement, so what can the JRC do? Being early involved in impact assessments, having, what else to do? Engagement, so early engagement in Horizon 2020 or in framing the research questions as well, and the policy questions as well. So I think that's one thing in which we can push. Very concretely, I think we should also continue pushing, having more science first in policy before we go to less science in policy. I think we are at a point in which we still have to convince the policy makers that science and the JRC plays and can play an important role. So before we move to questioning the use of science, let's first already put some more science in. I think then when we start questioning, of course, many elements of science and of especially the quantitative science, quantification, the modeling, we need to always be humble and aware of the limitations. So that's something that requires raising awareness, raising a culture, and it's part of this curriculum, I think, that Vladimir mentioned as well, being aware of the limitations of what we do. In addition to that, so doing that in the best way we can and being aware of the limitations. In addition, I think on the how, there's some elements that were pushed by Andrea when he was still here, which is, I think, the sensitivity auditing, which is a concept of looking at the use of models and questioning almost everything and seeing is it fit for purpose and seeing its limitations and communicating on that. So I think pushing that would be an important point. In addition to that, I think we should also push engagement. Good ways of citizen engagement, stakeholder engagement, many things with which Angela is working. So I think if you take these three elements, doing as good as we can, the quantitative analysis, which we're already doing, being aware of the limitations and communicating on their limitations, completing that with a framework of quality control and as Andrea called it, sensitivity auditing, whether you call it sensitivity auditing or other, is another issue. And then completing that with engagement. I think that would, if we push that agenda, I think we already make big steps forward. Beyond that, so that's like what can the JRC do in the policy process? I think the other question is what type of what are the questions, or how to address the issue of quality in science in general, and the issue of governance. The issues were discussed in many specific cases. It's very difficult to draw general conclusions. I think one thing that came, or one element that came back in many interventions and discussions was the transparency and openness, and what role can they play in enhancing quality. So there's too much science, and the quality of science is going down. Can increased transparency, openness, open science, can that lead to some self-selection and self-regulation? But may be too difficult to think of a way of having a framework in which we control quality. So maybe it must be organic, and maybe we must trust in self-selection ways, and that the best ways of science, the best science in the end will come up in new structures, and maybe the best structures will survive. So what type of structures then? There are already structures in which, how is music now on the internet selected? Everybody makes music, and then through some systems of comments, of likes, then some of the better ones come up. We have to see how that grows, and is that sufficient to really ensure quality, or there will be some selection, but it's something that we have to learn, I think. In addition, another thing that was mentioned a lot was communication, two ways. So we have to listen more and engage, and also we have to communicate better. We should not dump 300-page reports that nobody reads anyhow. So we have to be very, very concise and precise in the way we communicate. And of course, we have to engage stakeholders. So the third point was awareness. I already touched on that. So having some curriculum and building a culture of quality. I think she's gone now, but I think it was Diana of the University of Amersfoort. She had a very nice list of curriculum that she teaches in a week to some people. I think many of the points on that list would be useful for many people. To raise awareness of where you can go wrong. Now, I will also not take much more time. The issue of excellence and how to measure excellence, I think, remains an open question. There were many discussions, and it's very easy to criticize. I don't think we found a solution, so that still needs to be on the agenda for next times. And the same with reward systems, which are linked. So maybe I'll round it up there, and I will just want to say first that I think everybody here has been great. It was not an audience. It was a very participative group of people with very lively discussions. So I think you all deserve an applause. And then, but maybe keep it for the ones who organized it, because I think they really did a fantastic job in bringing so many people together that put in so much work. And I think everybody enjoyed it. There was a lot of laughter, inspiration. So thanks to Angela, Paolo, Thomas, Federico, and Susanna, and I hope I didn't... Alessia.